Welcome to the Botany Bistro, where we're serving up bite-sized botany for you to munch on as you savor the science of plants. My name's Mary, and I'll be your botanist today, and I'm joined by our wonderful horticulturist, Julie.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Bistro.
We can't wait to talk to you about our plant family today. We are diving into the Orchidaceae, and I definitely couldn't do this bistro alone because this is the second largest plant family in the world, behind Asteraceae, which we also did a bistro for if you want to go check that out. So there's just too many plants in this family to have one person talk about them.
There are a lot of orchids in this world.
I think we're sitting at about 28,000 species in the Orchidaceae.
Whoa, that's a lot of flowers.
They grow on every single continent except for Antarctica. What I love about orchids is that they are fairly easy to recognize, and so we'll talk a little bit about some of the identification for these plants, but there's a good chance that you probably have seen orchids before or have orchids in your home. Julie, I'm so glad that you're here, and
thanks for having me.
I love having you on the bistro. Why orchids? Why were you really excited to join in on this plant family today?
Well, I think orchids are especially interesting because of the brilliant way that they have been bred. And they weren't bred by us, they were bred by insects. Orchid flowers have a mimicking quality that tricks pollinating insects like wasps and beetles into landing on them, looking for a mate. When they are tricked into entering that flower, they get the pollen on them. When they realize that no mate is around, they leave and try again. The way orchids can do this is they actually emit the same reproductive pheromones that the insects have. It's incredible that plants have been able to evolve these traits, and it is because of that selection by the insects over time that has influenced the plant behavior.
That is wild to me. Orchids really do mimic that mate, and so these insects are trying to copulate with this flower, and in the process get the pollen on them and spread it around.
That's right. They don't have any choice. They have to enter the flower because they think that's where the mate is.
Yeah, I love that. So these flowers are very unique and, like I said, characteristic of plants in this family. These flowers exhibit bilateral symmetry, which is also known as being zygomorphic. That means that you could split that flower in half and you can see two mirror images. These flowers have 3 sepals, 3 petals, and one of these petals is made into kind of a lip, a little bit of like a landing pad for these pollinators. So we have this beautiful orchid with us today, and you can see that not all of the blooms are open. We're gonna have a few more coming on, but we have this really nice example of this petal that is made into a landing pad. So I'm gonna take, thank you, flower. I'm going to take a little friend from you so we can really talk about her today. And so if I wanted to make sure that I knew where the symmetry was, I really would look down the middle of this flower. But this little lip right here that just has these little bits of coloration on the inside, and I'm not getting anything.
I smell pheromones.
You must be part pollinator. And so some of these do have quite a fragrance, and so there's so much diversity in the industry on different types of orchids that have scent that we can smell. But really the goal is to try to attract this pollinator that will actually get in here and start to wiggle around the pollen that is hidden inside this enclosure. And it's enclosed in order to make sure that the plant doesn't self-pollinate. So I found that to be very interesting, that they actually need to be kind of roughed up a little bit, kind of broken up in order for that pollen to become exposed.
But this is a Phalaenopsis orchid, commonly found at the grocery store, and these aren't going to be pollinated, are they?
Not in my house.
Most of these orchids were really bred to be sturdy and long blooming, more than fragrant or attractive to insects.
Because not only do you need the insect to reproduce for a lot of these plants, but you also need this fungal agent. Some of these plants are not photosynthetic, and so they actually need this fungal association. Without that fungal association, the seeds can't germinate, or sometimes can't even be formed, or the plant can't even grow.
Wow.
So the orchids need lots of things. Obviously, we need water, moisture, a good place for it to latch onto its roots, whether it's an epiphyte that's growing in a tree or if it's a ground growing orchid. And then they need pollinators, and then they need this fungus. So orchids have a lot going on in their ecosystem.
No kidding. That's a really complicated association. But what did you mean when you said epiphyte?
Plants that are epiphytic, which is just a really fun word to say, actually can grow on other things, other plants,
Rocks in little crevices.
Yeah.
And they do that with these tough roots. This species of orchid specifically grows in the nooks of trees where leaf litter and moss likes to settle. So it has these thick roots that can really tuck into those crevices and hang on. And this one's actually potted in sphagnum moss, which is good for it.
Why does it like to be in moss like that?
It needs a lot of airflow on those roots because they aren't used to growing in soil. If you plant a grocery store Phalaenopsis orchid like this in regular potting mix, it will drown and suffocate. It needs to have its roots exposed to air and light even. That's why it comes in this little clear cup.
Interesting.
So to water an orchid, you don't want to put ice cubes in
No
the
ice
pot.
cubes. Stop doing that. She doesn't like that.
It's too cold. It's too cold. This plant is from the rainforest. She would never have ice on her roots. Just soaking them under the sink once a week to keep them moist, and then making sure that they're left somewhere that drains well will be enough to keep those roots healthy. You want them to be green or white. If they start to turn black or get really hard and crispy, you know that you've got a problem.
Oh. When I was working at Fairchild Tropical Botanic Garden, they started an orchid house. And they were growing all of these orchids in these tiny little bottles that were on their side.
Wow.
And it really was, not a ship in the bottle, but it was an orchid in a bottle.
Was that in Florida?
Yeah, it was beautiful. We mentioned that this is a Phalaenopsis orchid, but an orchid that we often bring into our lives is vanilla.
What?
So vanilla makes these beautiful pods of seeds, and there can be million seeds inside, and it grows on trees. It's kind of a vining orchid that we all fairly familiar with. We have some very special orchids right here at the Civic Garden Center.
We actually do. Not all orchids are tropical. Some of them are even native to Southwest Ohio, where we are right now. And somewhere in the Houck Botanic Garden, we have a pink lady slipper orchid, which is a very rare and special species of plant. It's very, very hard to grow a pink lady slipper, and unfortunately, poachers will sometimes take them from the wild because they are so hard to grow, but they're incredibly beautiful. People might kidnap them out of the forest and try to sell them. Unfortunately, they don't transplant very well, so if you ever come across a pink lady slipper orchid or any rare native plant, please leave it where you find it.
We actually had to take the sign down for the vanilla orchid when I was working in Florida because it was getting stolen.
The orchid hunting craze was very hot in the Victorian times.
Ooh, tell me more.
People searched all over the world for the rarest and most beautiful orchids to take back to England and put in their conservatories. And showing off your orchid collection to your friends was really a sign of how wealthy and sophisticated you were.
Whoa.
Of course, 4/5 of these orchids did die on the trip back from the jungle. So again, let's leave them where we find them.
Yes. Now, the other thing is that orchids are edible.
They are.
They are.
Not just vanilla?
So, not just vanilla. So, I have been to some fancy restaurants occasionally, and they'll put an orchid on your plate. You can also put orchids in salads. Make sure, though, that your orchids have not been treated with any kind of pesticide or herbicide. And so since this origin is unknown, I'm not going to be eating this orchid today, but if you would like to, you can look up some edible orchids and you can actually add these little pops of color to your plates and your desserts if you'd like.
I think I've had one garnishing a tiki drink before.
Yes, yes, and they're fleshy, they're kind of thick actually.
They are.
It's like you're chewing into, I don't know, a nice leaf of spinach or something.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's pretty spinach.
Orchids can be hybridized and even cloned. The first hybrid orchid was created in England about 100 years ago through meristem culture.
Whoa.
What is that?
Ooh, this is perfect for the bistro. And so meristematic tissue is undifferentiated tissues. So like we would take a cutting from a house plant and want that end of that cutting to produce roots instead of leaves like it might have been doing. This plant will do the same. And so as this new growth emerges, you can take very thin slices, razor thin slices of that tissue, and you can introduce that to a growing medium, and it can grow a whole new plant from that, which would be an exact genetic copy of the mother plant.
So all of her sisters are probably exact clones of her in the store.
Protecting the biodiversity in our habitats is so important for the continuation of this species and the other 700 genera that we have in this plant family. So we really don't know what we lose until we lose it. And so we are really promoting that people, keep their leaf litter down on their gardens this time of year, protect all those overwintering insects. You never kind of know what's gonna pop up and what you might be protecting while you're doing those sustainable gardening practices.
That's right. Orchids especially really show us how integral these relationships between flowers and their pollinators are. And so the more we can do to protect our flowers, the more we're doing to protect our pollinators and our entire food web. I know. So sweet.
And while we don't have any orchids blooming in our garden outside today, we do highly recommend that you visit our local conservatory. Crone Conservatory has a beautiful orchid house, little orchid space with little pond and just lots of curious orchids.
How many species of orchid do you think they have in there?
At least a dozen.
Definitely.
And new ones all the time.
Well, thank you so much for having me here today
Thank
to talk
you so
orchids.
much, Julie. I'm really glad that you came. We're so grateful that you joined us on the Bistro today. Stay tuned for more Bistro to go. Stop.
Oh, hello. I didn't see you there.
Yeah, I love it. All right.